This week on Critiquing Comics, a Crimean War story with a werewolf and an episodic detective story. Adam and Jason join me to critique both. First, I'd like to thank our patrons for helping to keep the show going. You can pitch in by pledging at least $2 a month at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
This is Adam.
This is Jason.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with another throat infection and with Adam in Nagoya. How you doing?
Doing good. I'm a little bit jealous of your dulcet baritone there.
Yeah, don't be. You can have it if you want it. I just had something like this like at the beginning of July, and now here we are, September 24th, and it's back. So
yeah, well, it likes you.
I guess. I don't like it. So we received a comic, or parts of a comic, from Adam McGovern, who is writing the comic. Apparently it was not finished as of when he sent it to me on September 4th. But this is a comic called The Night Brigade. And it's basically about the Crimean War, although, as he said in his message, it's with a werewolf serving as a metaphor for the war, I guess. So, the comic not being finished, we've only got some pieces of it here. There was a scene of 1, 2, 3, 4, what is this, about 8 pages.
Yeah.
9 pages. And then there was another PDF of 8 pages that I guess, Adam, either I didn't send it to you or you overlooked it. I'm not sure which, but that one had no lettering, no dialogue, just silence.
Yeah, I did not get that, but I'm not sure if it would have added to the mystery or what, because just now when you told me that it's about the Crimean War, I didn't gather that from the bit that I read. I knew that there was a war going on and that I assume he's based in France, but I did not see any. I wasn't able to gather what war it was. I did, of course, notice that there was a werewolf. That's pretty evident.
Yeah.
But I wasn't able to piece together necessarily that it was a critique on the war or a metaphor for the war, but there are definitely overtones that kind of hint at that. I mean, the fact that the wolf is somewhat aware of what he's doing as a werewolf, and resents what he's doing, but can't really stop the violence, and so that, yeah, I definitely got hints of that. That's saying a lot in 9 pages that I can gather that much. So, but yeah.
Now, that piece that we have with the dialogue, I believe that the woman in that is a real person. He mentioned several real people who are in this comic. Her name is Mary Seacole. She was from somewhere in the Caribbean, and she
I'm guessing
was there
Jamaica, because she says Kingston. Yeah,
kind of a healer. And also Florence Nightingale, who I believe is in the other PDF with no dialogue. I believe that's who that woman is. And then Louis Pasteur, who might also be in the silent PDF.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, I might have recognized them if they look like they actually did, but I definitely don't know who the first woman was. I did gather that she was somewhere from the Caribbean, I'm guessing Jamaica, but you mentioned Nightingale, and since we don't have a whole lot of comic to talk about here, I will go off on a slight tangent. I was, in Japanese elementary school and I guess junior high school, they just teach her name as Nightingale, not as, Florence Nightingale, and it's just Nightingale.
Yeah.
And so my daughter the other day was calling her Knighting. And I was like, do you think that her name is Knighting and her last name is Gale? And she was like, oh, is it Nightingale? And I was like, no, her last name is Nightingale. So, This is one of those classic things where like it just gets put in katakana and nobody knows where the break is. It's like, I think in Japan, everybody calls Hans Christian Andersen just Andersen, which could be any Andersen, like of the millions of Andersens out there.
Well, I'll never forget. So, NHK, the public broadcaster, kind of the BBC of Japan, used to show Sesame Street, just American Sesame Street, which was getting used more for English study than for the educational purposes it was made for. And, of course, there are sometimes celebrities on Sesame Street. And, I mean, this is many years ago. Pee Wee Herman was on. And so if it was a celebrity that, like, Japanese wouldn't know, it would give their name on the screen. And they just gave it as the letter P and then Herman in katakana.
P. Herman.
P. Herman. Paul? Well, that's his real name. But
that sounds so, it's almost like that, at the end of the Pee Wee movie where they're like, paging Mr. Herman, and you're like, his name is Mr. Herman. I never thought about that. So it's too formal for him. I think everybody just calls him Pee Wee. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's a little bit of a sidetrack here. But so I see. So it's a sort of a historical fiction or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it's based in reality, but okay. I mean, that makes me more curious to read it. Honestly, I kind of wish that we got a more complete manuscript to this time because
that's what we're used to here. It's hard to really critique the story. We might critique the art, but the story is kind of hard to tell.
Right. Well, we can get into the art if you'd like.
Sure.
So I felt like it had a very kind of 1990s Vertigo kind of vibe to it. Like it looked like when they were trying to market comics to adults, for like the first time back in the 90s, so like stuff like The Sandman or Swamp Thing or all those other kind of more, a little bit more grounded, more realistic, earthy kind of comic books that were coming out back then. And I say that I say that as a compliment because I loved all that stuff. It has, compared to a lot of the books that we read on this show that are done by, younger creators who make things look very poppy with bright colors and gradients and things like that, and a kind of Cartoon Network style. This one has a very kind of more realistic comic style with more kind of shadows and darker colors and kind of a muted palette. And I think it works really well for the type of story that it's trying to tell. Like it communicates a kind of somber wartime mood. And what I liked about the old Vertigo comics is the same thing I like about this. There's sort of just an air of mystery from the art. So, you have this West Indie kind of like, do people even say West Indies anymore? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I could be. Anyway, so they have this, Caribbean kind of healer, and she's using roots and plants and things. And I don't think I'm giving too much away when I say that she is able to control the werewolf using this kind of root of a plant or something like that, and to kind of get to the human underneath the wolf layer.
Yeah.
And so there's just this kind of almost magical realism about it where you just kind of accept that these magical things are happening in a otherwise very normal world that is very recognizable. So, and I think that comes, of course, from the story, but it also definitely comes from the artwork. And I think the two complement each other really well. Like the story itself is also told in a very Vertigo kind of style as well. Like it's very well written, and it never kind of beats you over the head and says, this is a war and we're doing this. It's all told through dialogue. So I thought that was all really well done.
Yeah, it looks good. I should mention that this artist's name is Bruno Letizia. He's Italian. He did art and colors. Okay.
Yeah, it's a very accomplished look. It honestly, it looks like it could be sold through Image or any of the bigger publishers like that. And the blocking, the way that the word balloons and everything is placed, and the angles of the shots and stuff. It's all very, very professionally done. So it looks very, like, from the very first page of the PDF that I saw, I thought it looked very professional, and the story had a way to kind of pull you right in, right from the get-go. So.
Mm-hmm. So looking at those other pages with no dialogue, I thought, well, I'm going to try to see if I can figure out what the story is without the dialogue. See how that, a way to measure how good the art is. I thought that it did. I could, obviously I can't tell what topic they might be talking about if it's something that's not shown in the panel, if it's something, the state of the war or the werewolf or whatever. But I felt like I could tell a lot from looking at the art. I think this woman, who I'm assuming is Florence Nightingale, she's reading by lantern light. She comes downstairs. Someone has brought in a very injured soldier who's lost an arm and part of a leg, and she talks for a while with one of the soldiers who brought him in, and then this wounded soldier, something really bad happens to him, and he's growing like a really demonic hand out of the missing arm area, and the look on his face is pretty evil. So something has taken him over, and then next thing we see, he's gone out the window.
Okay.
And there's another scene in here too, a couple pages of elsewhere. I don't know if this is supposed to be Louis Pasteur. He's walking around town with a top hat on, and on the second page, he sees this shadow of someone shooting at the werewolf. But exactly what happens after that, I can't tell because there aren't any more pages. But it looks really good.
Okay. Well, it was probably, I'm guessing, you just tried to guess what was going on with only artwork. So I'm going to try to guess what was going on with nothing. And I'm going to say that Louis Pasteur fixed the werewolf using penicillin.
Yeah, it was the werewolfness was cured by penicillin, I guess. Yeah, antibiotics, that's your cure for werewolfism.
Yeah. So I think the problem is that most people just don't go to get a doctor to look at it because they're afraid of the stigma. So
yeah, they're afraid they might eat the doctor. No.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm going to repeat myself here, but it's a shame that we didn't get more of this in our hands because I liked what I read. I mean, obviously, it took me about 5 minutes to finish the 9 pages. But
not much there.
Yeah, but it was all really well done. Like I said, and I hope that this book does well, and I hope that I eventually get a chance to see it in its finished form because it's very cool. Is this a Kickstarter project or?
They're going to crowdfund it on a site called zoop.gg. I'd never heard of it before. Maybe it's a European version of Kickstarter or something. But as far as I can tell, looking at that Zoop page, there's not a date set yet for the start of their campaign. I mean, I'll link to that page in the show notes, but yeah, and there's a button you can click to get notified if you're interested in getting an email when it goes live. But yeah, apparently maybe they're trying to finish the comic first and then start their crowdfunding.
Yeah, I mean, I can see both reasons to do the crowdfunding. Like having money is a good way to kind of motivate you to get something done. But on the other hand, being a patron who's supported a lot of these kind of Kickstarters, art is a very unpredictable thing, and it's very possible that you will be waiting for 5 years until it's done, or longer. But yeah, I hope that they, like I said, I wish them all the best. I think this is really a really, really good start of the book, and I'm curious to see where it goes.
By the way, I should mention, since this is critiquing comics, where we've often given the advice they should get an editor, he's got an editor. And an Eisner Award-winning one at that, according to the JPEG that he sent of his Facebook post. The editor's name is Chris Stevens.
Okay, well, so that's interesting that you mentioned that, because there's a part where the healer woman is talking to him, and she said, I was like Lot staring at Gomorrah or something like that. And the first pass that when I read that sentence, I thought it was a mistake. I thought it was a typo, and then I realized, they're talking about Lot from the Bible. Mm-hmm. And I realized, that they're better than me at composing sentences. So it was my mistake.
And I was kind of watching for the bugaboo. Jason often brings this up of eyes with serifs that aren't the personal I, or they aren't the beginning of a sentence or something, and I couldn't find any. So I don't know if that's to the credit of the editor or if the letterer just knows his stuff, but either way, it's none of that. So
yeah. So hats off to them. Very professional artwork, very professional writing, very professional editing. So I don't think they need our cheers to motivate them to keep going, because they definitely have a good team going right now. So
yeah, right. Okay, so yeah, check out the link in the show notes to their Zoop page.
All right, Tim, you get some penicillin in you for your werewolfery and for your sore throat.
Yeah, I'm afraid I might turn into a werewolf if I don't get this taken care of. So.
For the listeners at home, you can't see that. It's like the Teen Wolf movie. I can see like his sideburns growing out currently while he's talking to me. So there's a nice young reference for the younger kids at home.
Oh, yeah. Up to the minute. That's us. Check the link in the show notes for more on the Night Brigade. Coming up, Jason joins me to look at the cases, 2 of them anyway, of Private Eye Joe Mallard. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon. Follow the link to Amazon from there and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week. We really appreciate your support.
Hello, I'm Ken Holtzhauser, and if you're looking for something new in comic books, may I recommend my newest comic, The Quick and the Dad, a love letter to the DC, Marvel, Archie, and Harvey comics of my youth. This comic has everything. It has spaceships, dad jokes, alien invasions, time travel, supervillains, and so many bad puns. Hopefully you'll like it. It's the cutest comic you've never heard of, and it's available today in print and digital from indieplanet.com. That's The Quick and the Dad. Join that other dynamic duo, won't you?
All right, I'm back. My voice is not back, but Jason's here now. How are you?
I'm delightful. I'm going to make my voice extra velvety tonight.
Okay,
to pick
counterbalance.
up the slack since you started smoking.
Yeah, well, listeners should be happy I didn't try to record an episode between the time when I recorded Adams and when I'm recording this, because my voice got a lot worse before it started getting better.
There could be a market for that.
Right, I don't think so. If somebody wants this cold, I'll sell it to them cheap. Okay, so we're looking at a comic called Joe Mallard by Asante Amani. 2 issues. They're both pretty short, like 8 pages. First one's 8, second's 11. These are quite brief.
I wouldn't even call them issues. I would just call them like stories.
Yeah, chapters, installments.
Mm-hmm. And I'm a big fan of short stories, especially short detective stories. And I found both of these actually really quite charming. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I liked about them, and they're hard to talk about without spoiling, but just if you're a fan of the genre, these stories are really tightly told in a way that leaves you as the viewer to sort of be a participant and fill in some of the gaps. Because they end kind of quickly, and then you're like, oh, and then you think about it, and you can kind of know what happens next, and you can fill in the gaps that maybe aren't explicitly told. And I enjoy that. It doesn't have the Columbo effect where it's like, well, now let me explain to you how this mystery was done. And, it's really like you have to figure it out. But all the clues and the answers are there, which I really appreciate. And I love being succinct. I love what a story is like. Not every story needs to be 24 pages or 112 pages, but I would read a full collection of these. These are just 2 short stories told very well, and I would love a big collection. If Asante is listening, give me more, please. And then put them all together and put it on a Kickstarter so I can give you money and I can put that book on my shelf because I quite enjoy these. But Tim, is your voice up to telling everyone what Joe Mallard's all
What Joe Mallard's about? Okay, so who
is this Joe Mallard character?
Is a detective, private investigator, and so these 2 stories are each about cases that he worked on. Now, the first story, I thought it was kind of interesting that, unless I missed it, which is possible, it didn't seem like the mystery itself was ever quite solved, and that wasn't really the point of the first story. It was more
I would
telling
argue
us.
It was solved.
The way I read it, it was telling us more about Joe as a person, and that he decided to do something he wasn't getting paid for. But how do you thought it was solved? I mean, we saw him pursuing this guy and getting clues, but.
So there is a time constraint. This young lady hires Joe Mallard. She only can. He does not. We do learn about him, and he won't give people discounts. And he's like, okay, you can only hire me for 3 hours. And he actually does solve the case within 3 hours. I don't want to spoil everything because it's a short piece, but the clues are there, and the fate of the person and the fate of all the people is heavily implied to be solved from the look on his face and from the evidence found. And he looks at his watch with this look that says, "Aha! I solved it in 3 hours." I'll tell you offline.
Okay.
What the connect? I felt the same. At the first, I was like, "Huh," and then I reread it, and I was like, "Nope, all the pieces are 100% there. You have to reread it." But he absolutely solves the mystery. It does. He's not doing anything for free, and he does solve it in 3 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, these are thinkers. I hate stories that hold your hand and over-explain things. So I sort of appreciate what is withheld in these stories. They definitely, this creator, Asante, has a very strong voice, and I was really enchanted by how they told the story.
The first page bothered me a bit because it doesn't make sense for her to tell Joe Mallard about a previous case that he was involved in, because he knows that already. I mean, it's obviously aimed at the reader, but it felt a little heavy-handed to have her telling basically the audience, this is what happened in the past, and so now that I want Joe to do this. And there might have been another way to get that information across. I don't like some kind of flashback or something, but.
I agree. It was clunky. And in fact, we learned more about she talks more about a previous case than her own missing mom.
Yeah.
But I would agree that I read that and I was like, it could use some wordsmithing, I would say. Because she does talk at length to the reader, a big expository chunk of information that Joe would obviously know.
Yeah.
I thought the first page there was, what I'm going to say, I always have to say about the lettering. It looks like the balloons are part of the artwork. That is, they're drawn into the composition of the art.
Mm-hmm.
And in a couple of spots, I noticed that elements of the composition were almost making room for the balloon and the tail. Like they were getting out of the way of the balloon and tail. And the artwork should never be recognizing that there's a balloon over it. These are separate things. On this is the very, very first panel. There's a tail from the balloon that's going across the name of the diner, and the words of the diner have spread apart to make the tail. And there was another spot where there was a tangent, but there was a balloon on someone's chest, and the lines from the balloons kind of intersected with the lines of his chest. So I would just go as lettering is its own art form, and it's challenging.
Also, you bring up the lettering. I felt like in some places the words were too crammed together and leaving a lot of white space between the words and the edge of the balloon. And I was wishing that he had made the lettering a little bigger because he had room to do that.
This is what I mean. I think the lettering is digital and that balloons are drawn analog. And they are not quite working in Congress as well as they should. Sometimes the balloons have too much air in them. Other times they're just right. Other times the words are cramped because he's combining digital and analog, which I would push him to make the balloons digital and just finish the artwork and lay the balloons over the artwork. But, that's a skill that's secondary to visual storytelling. Not that the visual storytelling was really good. It was really excellent. And I have to compliment the facial grammar of that waitress who's telling the sad story. I felt sad for her. She was very distraught. It's, you can hit that bell too many times, but I thought it worked really, really well.
I'm wondering why the character's name is Joe Mallard.
Wow.
And I mean, first that title made me think it might be a funny animal cartoon. But it's anything but funny animals.
Well, maybe that's contrasting, right? If you give someone a funny name, but they have like a hard-boiled job, it gives it a little bit of mirth, right? As opposed to like, Joe Leathershoes or something. Something too on the nose. Joe Mallard is sort of a mirthful name.
Yeah. Well, I guess we interpreted this first story in different ways, but I think either way, it's interesting. It's a pretty good short story.
Are you ready to tear apart the second one?
All right, let's go. Second issue.
The second story really feels about like the temptations of the internet. So Joe gets pulled into a case of a missing husband, and nothing is quite what it seems. And I thought that one was very, very strong. Even if some of the evidence is a bit obvious, you have 11 pages to tell a story. You have to sort of take a couple of shortcuts as far as like what people will put online that will lead you in the right direction. But that was my favorite of the two because there is sort of a twist ending that for me landed pretty well. That's the one where I'm like, ooh, I want to reread this and see the clues that were right in front of me all along. And that one is an epic length of 11 pages.
Right.
So it's Asante's first Odyssey.
Yeah. So in this one, it really, I could see he solved the case, and this is the result of him solving the case. So I think we probably interpreted this one the same.
Yeah, this one's a little more obvious, but it has a few more twists, and it does sort of give you something to think about, which I always think a good story should do. Even at 11 pages, that's very successful.
Any comments on the art?
This reminds me of like indie comics in the 90s. In the early aughts, like when I was coming into independent comics, this artwork reminds me a lot of that. Asante is not going to be drawing the X-Men anytime soon, and I think that's fine. I think this looks like a top shelf book from like 15, 20 years ago. So it's not the most commercial artwork, but it's effective for what it is.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I just remembered that I wanted to say something about the feel of these stories. I don't know if the art contributed to it, but kind of the type of story. It reminded me a little of Matt Kindt's work.
Yeah, I would agree.
There's kind of a mystery you have to figure out. Just something about the feel of the stories was bringing that to mind. Go ahead.
We should also say it's black and white artwork, but it's on gray paper. So there's really no hard whites except for like in the balloons themselves, the word balloons. So I think what you're talking about is there is like a darkness to this story. And in the second one, there is no whiteness in the balloon, just in some of the text. So it does sort of create a mood and a tone that I think just works really well.
Yeah, I think just something about the storytelling in general gave me that feeling of, it's like a Matt Kindt book. The art, you're right. It's not Marvel DC type art at all. But Yeah, I mean, it does its job. I can follow the story. I can understand what's going on, and there's some fairly intricate. This cold is zapping my vocabulary. Fairly intricate panels.
I would argue that if you put Jim Lee on this book, it wouldn't work. If you put Art Adams on this story, it wouldn't work. This, the charm of this and the way it works is this illustration style. That I think anything more bombastic and illustrative would detract from the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Sometimes you need a simple drum beat. Yeah. And I would also say that the lettering got better in the second issue. And I like that Asante took the white out of the balloons and just left it on the internet text. I don't know. It really works. There's a panel. The layouts here are pretty straightforward. It's for 6 panels, 8 panels on a page. But there is one where there's a character in a tent, and it goes from there's an all black in the top left to a close up in the bottom right. The tent's in the middle, and just something small like that is really effective. We know when and where we are, and then you almost hear the crunching of the grass in that close up. And then we go to a deep focus inside the tent with the character's body inside the tent and Joe outside the tent looking in. And it's small little choices like that are really effective and just make this work as a detective story. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if Jim Lee calls you, Asante, tell him to go kick rocks. You've got this. Do you know what I mean? It's like a good punk song. A good punk song you don't want to have overproduced. Mm-hmm. You kind of want to hear the scratches a little bit. Sure. You want to see the line work. Yeah. You want to see the hand that drew. You feel the hand that drew this. And just from, I don't know if these are done in the order we got them, but I think the art style, it just improved a little bit from 1 to 2. The balloons improved from 1 to 2. And the storytelling got better from 1 to 2. So I want to see 3, 4, 5, 25, 35. Keep going. This is definitely in my wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. And Jim Lee's got plenty of work, I just gave him $40,000 for a sketch.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I would like to... Yeah, I didn't think you had $40,000 lying around.
I've made $40,000 lifetime.
But yeah, I liked it too. I'd like to see more also.
Yeah, great job, Asante. Keep it coming. Where can people find Asante and read their work and support them, Tim?
Well, let's see. In the comic itself, it gives a Twitter handle, Asante__Amani. I'm sure there's a website or something out there. I'll link to it in the show notes.
Nobody wants to go to Twitter. Not anymore. Asante, I'm proud of you. Keep up the good work. I am going to be following Joe Mallard for years to come, I hope.
I did indeed find Asante Amani's page on the website bio.site, and I've linked to it in the show notes. Thanks to our patrons for supporting Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and our other podcasts. To join them, go to patreon.com/deconcomics. Patrons get access to podcasts about the early years of The Amazing Spider-Man, Jim Starlin's run on Captain Marvel, and more. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is from bensound.com. Next week, we represent a 2015 episode in which Takehiko Inoue's basketball manga, Real, is reviewed by Kumar and his brother Ilango. Ilango passed away recently, so we'll flash back to this episode as a salute to him. Real deals with basketball and physical handicaps, and our 2 reviewers found a lot to like about it. So be sure to listen next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics.